Hello and welcome to Dialogue. China's top political advisory body, the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or CPPCC, is holding its annual session in Beijing from March 4th to the 11th. National political advisors will deliberate key work report, attend the session of the National People's Congress, review the government work report, and discuss the draft 15th five-year plan. So what will CPPCC members be primarily focused on this year? Why are these annual meetings of the two sessions so important? And as China enters the first year of the 15th five-year plan, how will different sectors of society work together to boost development and expand opening up? Join us for our discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Joining me today are Wang Xinsong, Associate Professor at Beijing Normal University, Xia Lu, Research Fellow at the National Academy of Development and Strategy, Renmin University of China, Zoon Ahmed Khan, Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. Zoon, welcome to the show. I will start with you. I mean, you have been living in China for a number of years. I'm sure you're familiar with the two sessions, CPPCC and the National People's Congress. So tell with us, especially for our viewers, overseas viewers, what are the two sessions? What is the CPPCC? I mean, how it functions?
Thank you, firstly, Qinduo, for having me. I have been living in China for over a decade. And one thing I can say for overseas viewers is that definitely, the Chinese political system, it is very advanced. I think that's one word that I'll use for it, because it is very receptive and it's looking at many, aspects, facets of the Chinese economy, society, global and regional and domestic, challenges as well as opportunities. So a lot of people think that, the Chinese system, the Chinese political system is not democratic in the way that Western democracies work. But if we look at it more closely, we call it the whole process people's democracy. And essentially, this is a system where you do have elections on a very local level. But at the same time, the decisions that are being made for the next year and for the next 5 years, when it comes to, the five-year plans, as we have the 15th five-year plan, these are done in a very receptive way to the evolving changes and to evolving demands of people. Specifically, if I want to try and, help an international audience understand what is the CPPCC. So essentially, this is a group, a board of, advisors, people with technical expertise from different fields. They could be doctors, lawyers, academicians, even people, who are on the front lines. And these are the people that are going to give recommendations, policy recommendations. They're going to understand the vision of the party, which has already been set, to give specific policy advices. And this advice is also based on not only their technical experiences, expertise, their interactions with people in their own fields, but also from very, new emerging requests, demands, and feedback coming from people. These feedback loops are online. They're on different fora, different, voting systems, etc., where they're trying to understand what is the direction also in which the economy should go, the people, the society wants to go. And then specifically the two sessions, especially coming from a developing country where we want to see more receptivity when it comes to governance. The two sessions are the annual meetings that are going to look at what's working and what isn't. To what extent, the vision that has been decided by the government and the specific policies, where the feedback comes from the CPPCC and the final legal authority comes from the National People's Congress. Every year, those policies, the extent to which they have been achieved, the extent to which they are working, and the extent to which they need to evolve to meet the actual demands of the vision, it's going to be discussed and understood in the two sessions. So in a nutshell, what I would say is that because of the CPPCC, with very technical expertise and, all senses on the ground, understanding evolving realities and demands of the people, this is a system that is every year, especially, making sure that not only the vision is being followed, but the people are, as stakeholders in the society, are part of it. Their demands are being met as well. So it's a very modern, a very sophisticated form of governance, I would say.
Very sophisticated form of governance. Professor Xia Lu, of course, this is a precious window opportunity to take a closer look at the Chinese politics and how does that work. Share with us more about CPPCC. How does it differ from the National People's Congress? I know Zoon mentioned a little bit, and also in what way do these two meetings complement each other?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. Well, this is a very good question. Although we put these two sessions together in research and in kind of international communication, these two sessions, these two conferences, these two bodies are kind of significantly different. For example, the National People's Congress, the NPC, actually it is the highest legislative organ of China. So it's like the Congress. We can see the function from its name. It's the Congress. Let's say they have a lot of deputies there, more than 2,600 deputies meeting together. They are making law. They are kind of approving the budget. They are also approving those kind of the assignment of the significant post. So these are the function of NPC. However, the CPPCC, the political consultative conferences, they are more like advisory, like Zhu just mentioned. It's more like advisory suggestion. However, this suggestion and advice also play important role because this kind of members, or we can say the members of the CPPCC, they were previous kind of cadres and officials. They were previous kind of key position holders, and they knew more about how Chinese economy run and how Chinese government run. So they more like a kind of a channel between the government, the current government, let's say, people, and also a government official and the people. So I think the CPPCC played more role in terms of deliberation, spread of important information, and also to bring those kind of suggestion and the expectation of the people to the decision-making process.
Yeah, thank you, Xia Lu there. And we have a professor, of course, Wang Xinsong. Xinsong, we mentioned a little bit about this, 5-year plan, 2026 being the first year of this 5-year plan. And of course, for every year there's government work report. But overall, what's to expect? What will be the focus probably, especially for viewers to focus on in the next, about more than a week, I guess?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And in order to discuss the major gist of the next 5-year plan, we have to understand that the Chinese economy and the society are undergoing very deepened structural reforms. And in terms of the economy, I think the overall structure is shifting from the traditional fossil fuel-based and the GDP-driven growth toward more high-quality development and more consumption-driven and more green energy-driven economic structure. With that said, however, we are facing a lot of challenges. For example, when it comes to a high-tech-driven economy, we have benefited substantially from the economic consequences of the platform economy, which creates a lot of jobs and generates a lot of conveniences for consumers. But at the same time, we're talking about informal employment on the rise, with a lot of workers working on gig basis. So their social welfare, social security structure is becoming ever more important, because without a adequate and proper social welfare program to support their pension, their medical insurance, and etc., it's going to be a very huge challenge for these workers and for their families. And at the same time, the Chinese economy is facing a challenge of boosting the consumption. We have seen some good figures from the spring New Year travels and tourism and so forth. We have seen overall consumption being proportion of Chinese GDP growing in 2025. However, these figures are still having a lot of room to improve. I think the government and the legislature and the CPPCC in the upcoming 2 sessions are going to have a lot of serious discussions regarding how we can roll out more incentive structures to stimulate more consumption. Because if you look at the statistics, Chinese household consumption as percentage of GDP is about 40%. And if you add government consumption, which is about 16%, so that's roughly 56%, which is still lower than the world's average, which is about 70%. So there's room for improvement. At the same time, we have a lot of bright spots. Obviously, the high-tech industry is advancing really fast, and the new energy, renewable energy sector is growing really, really strong. And in 2025, the Chinese share of the global newly installed capacity in terms of solar and wind energy has exceeded over half of the world's total. So that tells you that the Chinese industries in high-tech, in renewable energy are growing very well. So the next question is obviously to strike a balance between all these sectors and the traditional Chinese economy.
Xinsong mentioned an interesting point here. Zoom, of course, like when we talk about the next 5-year plan, next 5 years, that kind of growth or economic expansion will be based on the previous 5 years, right? The 14th 5-year plan. So if you look at I think this quite a defining feature of this current 15th 5-year plan. They call it like this is important because its goal is going to realize its goal of the basic socialist modernization. 15th 5-year plan is critical as China works to reinforce the foundations and pushes ahead on all fronts forward toward basically realizing social modernization by 2035. So next 5 years plus another 5 years, okay, the goal will be realized. But of course, the 14th 5-year plan, I mean, it met challenges, obviously, in the pandemic, and also, say, U.S. tech war, U.S. trade war on China, etc. A lot of challenges domestically, externally. But still, if you look at the economy, basically 5% economic growth, that's really something.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was thinking exactly about this, Chendo. Previous 5-year plan, we were still not able to understand what's going to happen. It was the beginning of COVID. Of course, there was also, I think we all remember, there was a lot of conversation globally that China, they started with the BRI and there was this whole effort to engage the world, especially the global south. And then suddenly there were a lot of rumors that now China is just going to close off completely. But just look at where we are in 2026. China is not just the country that was able to achieve its economic growth, GDP growth target 5%, which was already by some standards an ambitious target. China was not only able to alleviate, absolute poverty completely, which was 70% of global poverty reduction. Essentially, it was also able to open up in a way that today we are talking about China's development, not just as, China is like was just said, China is building the world's capacity also to develop in a more sustainable, in a greener way. We are at the cusp also of the AI revolution. And look at the countries that were traditionally expected to lead the world when it came to this, another revolutionary change. And those are the countries that are backing down, causing uncertainties. They don't see themselves as competitive. They do not believe in engaging the world constructively. And here China is acknowledging, even the documents, the communication so far, today is a strategic opportunity. And I think China has always, when it comes to especially even development with BRI countries, China always said, take these as opportunities and we need to take ownership. So we today say that China's, further rise, China's increased leadership globally is inevitable. But it is inevitable because China is a country with a governance system and an understanding of the realities of the world. And it's a system that is receptive and willing to evolve and change. So like was mentioned, truly, there are a lot of challenges, also domestically, demographic changes, consumption. But we see that now in the 15th 5-year plan already, there is a focus on addressing those challenges. China is today, as was believed 5 years ago, that China will not be an innovative society. Today, it is a priority to make the society to really, untap their potential innovation. There is a focus on education, how to advance education and exposure in a way that the Chinese people are truly partners in these ambitions ahead in the next 5 years. So I think whatever China achieved in the 14th five-year plan, given the challenges, gives us a good assessment of, with the communication, we know that there is an understanding of the realities domestically and globally. And there is also all of those ideas that the preconceived notions by some that China will somehow go in a different direction, they have been completely negated by what we have seen so far. So I think, and another thing I'll mention quickly is that the emphasis on deepening the reform, the emphasis on making sure that the rural areas of China that have already come a long way further continue to improve, and that potential is truly untapped. I think that's also something that a lot of developing countries can learn from.
Mm-hmm. Xia Lu, Zoon mentioned an interesting point. Basically, it answers the question of what's the purpose of a development. It's for the people. It's not for the capital, for example. It's kind of a different system, right? A system, revolving around the capital, more profit, yes, more development, more expansion. But sometimes, if you don't take into consideration the welfare of the people, it could create problems. For overall, still is about economic growth. So for the next 5 years, Professor Xia Lu, what's the overall picture looks like for the year 2026, for example, the economic growth? Earlier, we mentioned about it's kind of like a mixed picture. Some areas there are challenges. In some areas we have strong growth. But what about the overall economic expansion?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Well, actually, I totally agree with Zoon's opinion in terms of the function of the development or the foundation of the development. Actually, should be lies at the people. Well, actually, I would like to share with you two important points of the last 5 years before I kind of do my expectation on the 2026. Well, actually, we know that in the last 5 years, in the 14th five-year plan, we had at least 2.5 years in the pandemic. Well, China still made a lot of significance, made a lot of significant contributions, not only in its own economy, domestic economy, but also in the international economy. Also, economy is not only about the digit. Economic growth is not only about the growth of a digit or change of a digit. It has a broader kind of function and aspect. For example, the foundation. For example, the improvement of the public, let's say, infrastructure. Well, I focus more on the sustainable development, for example, the environmental protection, and also the green infrastructure. Well, now I'm in Xinjiang. Actually, I've been in Xinjiang for more than 1 year. Well, actually, last year, 2025, marked the 70th anniversary of the founding of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And also in last year, there was a very, very famous, magnificent project accomplished in Xinjiang. That was the circle. That was the circle locked of the great desert in Xinjiang. We know a lot of desert in Xinjiang, and the biggest desert in Xinjiang has already been locked by a circle of forest with more than 3,000 kilometers, and that was magnificent, and that was something. And that was not only about the economy, because we gotta put a lot of money, invest a lot of money there. But in short term, we don't see any improvement. In long term, that definitely will be the foundation for China's economy. And then comes to 2026. Well, we know that next 5 years in the 15th five-year plan, I noticed that there is one more important thing, is that quality is more important than quantity. So I think in the next 5 years, not only in the next 5 years, but also the year to 2035, I think Chinese economy or Chinese decision maker will pay more attention on the quality, not only in the people's livelihood, but also the improvement of public infrastructure and also the sustainable development.
Right, Xia Lu, you mentioned an interesting point about this, the green development the overall welfare of the, in that region, for example, in Xinjiang. I know this time around, Chinese lawmakers are set to deliberate on the draft environmental code. The proposed environmental code would systematically consolidate and upgrade existing environmental protection laws, legislation, embedding the principle of green development more firmly into China's rule of law framework. I mean, how big a thing is that? Xia Lu, yeah.
Well, actually, yes, of course. I would like to make a very simple point here is that we can see that this year's the NPC session there will be 3 draft law under deliberation, right? But previously, last year and the year before last year, and also in the year 2023, in each and every year's National People Congress session, there was only 1 draft law under delegation. Deliberation. But this year there are 3 draft law. The law in terms of the protection, environmental protection, the law on the ethnicity unity progress, and the law on the national planning regulation. So that means that kind of give us a very, very good signal that China is making significant progress in the rule of law. Everything, every activity, every management, every government and public activity should be based on legal foundation, should be based on law. So this kind of environmental protection and environmental, let's say, punishment, and who can do more to the environment, the green development function, the green development kind of contribution are all, let's say, regulated, coordinated in this kind of law. So I think that would be more important to China's, not only in the economy, but also for China's legal improvement and legal, let's say, development in the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, Xinsong, earlier you mentioned about the strong growth in the renewable technology, and also the AI technology, digital development. I know this year for some of the, CPPCC members, for example, they have mentioned about some policy proposal. Some of them, of course, aimed at promoting the industrial use of humanoid robots, speeding up the development of AI agents, and expanding computing infrastructures. Very, very frontline development plans there. And that's important for economic growth. Are those areas basically supposed to be the new or economic drivers for like 2026 and onward economic expansion?
Yeah, exactly. I think the Chinese AI strategy is multifolded. On the one hand, I think the Chinese AI strategy emphasizes a lot on AI plus or applications of AI technology, which projects China's development strategy in contrast with the U.S., for example. So here, the national government last year passed the regulation on promoting AI plus strategy by integrating AI technology in various social economic sectors, including urban development, including healthcare, social welfare, as well as governance. The idea is that technology is, after all, for applications, for benefits of people. So I completely agree with your earlier point about investing in people, which has become a very useful slogan since last year. Because at the end of the day, all we were doing, spending on R&D and investing in technology and investing in social welfare, is all for the Chinese people's benefits and to some extent for the benefits of other people in other countries. Now, the second fold of the Chinese AI strategy is not to give up on frontier models. There has been the conventional wisdom, which is widely shared by international media, by saying that China is good at applications but not good at foundation models, which is completely wrong. Because if you look at the foundational models that are popular now across platforms in both U.S. and China, many of them are Chinese foundation models and frontier models, and they're open source and they're widely deployed by cloud services, not just in China but across the world.
Yeah.
But then the third foundation is the infrastructure. So I agree with Professor Xia on the importance of infrastructure, because when it comes to digital development and AI strategy, China has benefited a great deal from our long-term investment in the national grid system, for example, the ultra high voltage or UHV national grid system, which transmits electricity from one province to another long distance. So that creates an opportunity where China can utilize the cheaply generated power from Western provinces to do computing, using data from Eastern prosperous cities. So this integrates the power grid with the data across regions. At the same time, it integrates economic and social development across regions. So with multifolded strategy, I think China is on the right track to further promote the AI development, but at the same time to generate benefits and inclusivity for the Chinese people.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, some say in the 14th five-year plan, in terms of tech development, China focused on resolving the choke point problem. Basically, it's kind of like a defensive practice. Mm-hmm. But for the next 5 years, China will focus on the originality or foundational development, invest in R&D to start not from one, but from zero. Mm-hmm. Is that the case?
That's certainly the case, and it's happening. And if you look at the R&D, which is now accounting for 2.8% of Chinese GDP, which is a substantial growth if you look at previous data. There's still room for improvement for sure, but we are making a lot of progress on that. And with that level of R&D, we are seeing many substantial improvements in those choke point technologies. When it comes to semiconductors, we sure don't have the top-notch ones, but we're really getting there. But more importantly, I think the Chinese are really good at adapting our technologies to our conditions. For example, we're advancing technologies to better integrate hardware with software. So if you look at DeepSeek, which is being choked by not having the most advanced GPUs, but nonetheless, it is able to roll out the world-class frontier model, which is, really striving for AGI, which is being shared as a goal by those, top-tier frontier companies in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Well, Zoon, I know, you spend most of the time in China, in Beijing. Related development, of course, to AI. Jack Ma of Alibaba, he suggested that time spent memorizing textbooks could be freed up to cultivate creativity and imagination. So application of AI technology on education. Any observation there?
What I do know is, the change is happening incredibly fast. I'll give a small example. I've traveled to other countries recently. I'm also currently in Pakistan. What I can tell you is that parents of young kids know a lot about how advanced the techniques and what all, children in Chinese schools are being taught, how it's opening up their minds. They know that AI education, and I already have a list of people who want to sign their children up for AI camps for their children who are very young in China, in Beijing particularly. But, that aside, what I see is that increasingly, it's obviously a vision from the government. Like I previously mentioned, the society needs to be creative to make the most of this critical strategic opportunity. It's also awareness from young, parents, or you say, Gen Z or millennials. They also want, their children to ask more questions, to be more creative, to think more critically. I think that change is happening on the vision of the government level, on a societal level, and newer techniques are being introduced in Chinese schools and also in Chinese universities. New majors are being introduced. So I feel, from this stereotype that somehow Chinese education is all about rote learning and it's all about the one Gaokao exam, which is still very stressful. I hope it ceases to be that stressful because so much more will be part of that decision-making process, maybe in some years to come. But we see a young generation of Chinese, even university students already who are creating emerging technologies and are increasingly competing successful with the top-tier talent in the world. So there is a change, and I think it's a much deeper change than people actually realize.
Well, looking forward to the near future. Well, with that, we come to the end of today's discussion. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGT app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.